My parents stole my $100,000 college fund to buy my sister a house, then laughed in my face when I threatened to sue. So I made them regret it. I'm a 17-year-old girl, and I'm supposed to start college in about 4 months. But now there's a huge problem. My parents are refusing to give me the college fund my grandparents left for me. Instead, they've decided to hand that money over to my older sister Chloe, who's 25, so she and her boyfriend Tom, who's 27, can buy a house. For as long as I can remember, Chloe has always been the golden child in our family. I, on the other hand, have always been treated like an afterthought. When I was younger, I didn't really question it. I thought it was just how things were, that Chloe, even though she was older, still got babied while I was left to figure things out on my own. But as I got older, it became obvious that I was never going to come first. They had made that pretty clear, whether they meant to or not. Eventually, I forced myself to accept it, because what choice did I have? It's not like we had other close family around to lean on. Both of my parents have relatives in other states, but we barely ever saw them. That included my grandparents, though I always knew one thing for sure: my paternal grandparents had set aside money specifically for my college education. My grandpa passed away about 3 years ago, and then last year, we lost my grandma too. That's when we finally learned what was in their joint will. Turns out, they had arranged for a decent chunk of money to be left for me, and it was clearly meant to cover college. They hadn't excluded my parents or Chloe either. My folks inherited the rest of the estate, and Chloe was given all the jewelry, which, knowing my grandparents, was pretty valuable. They liked to live well, so everything they left behind had significant worth. I actually thought the way they divided things was fair. I got the funds for school, and the others got valuable items they could sell if they needed cash. But because I'm not 18 yet, the money couldn't go directly to me. Instead, my parents were put in charge of it until I became a legal adult. Honestly, I don't blame my grandparents for that decision. They had no idea what kind of people my parents really were. In public, my parents always put on this perfect family act, but I was the only one who saw the reality that I was treated like an outsider in my own home. So, naturally, my grandparents assumed my parents would do the right thing. I never thought to tell anyone what my life was really like behind closed doors, so no one had a reason to question the arrangement. Still, my parents decided to twist things to their advantage. They used the fact that they were in control of the money to take it away from me and give it to Chloe so she could buy a house. I didn't even find out right away. I only learned the truth recently when I brought up the funds with them. I had started applying to colleges and knew I'd need to start putting down deposits soon. When I asked, they kept brushing me off, saying we'd talk about it when the time came and that I should just relax for now. But something felt off. I couldn't shake the feeling that they were hiding something from me, so I kept asking, and eventually, they admitted it. They told me that they had already transferred all the money to Chloe because she and Tom were house hunting and needed help with the down payment. Just to give you some context, Chloe works as a kindergarten teacher and Tom's a zookeeper. So, no surprise, their budget isn't very high. But for some reason, they've convinced themselves that they deserve a fancy house in a nice neighborhood, calling it a lifetime investment. Personally, I think if they can't afford a house right now, they should stay in their rental apartment and save up until they actually can. The idea that they're using my college fund to chase a dream they can't afford makes my blood boil. When I found out, I completely lost it. I demanded they return the money immediately. I remember the amount their lawyer told me. It was a sizable sum, enough to cover all 4 years of college and then some. I even wrote it down. I'm not going to share the figure here, but it was more than enough to secure my future. First, I broke down crying. Then I went off, I screamed, I cursed, I argued, but nothing I said seemed to get through to them. They just stood there and told me, calm as anything, that they knew exactly what they had done and didn't regret it. According to them, it wouldn't be fair for me to have it easy in college when Chloe had to take out student loans. They said I needed to earn my education, just like they all did. Letting me use that money, they said, would somehow be a slap in the face to Chloe. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I tried reasoning with them, reminding them that my grandparents had also given Chloe valuable items in the will. I said she could sell some of that stuff if she really needed money, but taking what was meant for me? That was just cruel. Of course, I should have known better than to think they'd change their minds. They shut me down, told me the decision was final, and that they weren't going to ask Chloe to return a dime. They acted like it was no big deal, so casual, so cold that by the end of it, I was cussing them out again. I even told them I was going to take legal action. And honestly, I'm still thinking about it, because I know I've got grounds to sue them. My parents had been given the responsibility of keeping that college money safe until I turned 18, at which point I'd be able to use it myself. But instead of protecting it, they went and used it for something completely unrelated. When I called them out on it, they just laughed. I'll never forget what my dad said. He looked me dead in the eye and asked, "With what money?" Like the whole thing had never existed. That moment hit me harder than I expected. I don't think I've ever felt more humiliated or powerless. It was like all the control was yanked right out from under me, and I was stuck being completely dependent on people who didn't care about my future. I started kicking myself for never speaking up about how they'd been treating me all these years. I'd stayed quiet, partly because I didn't think anyone would take it seriously. I mean, they weren't physically abusive or anything, they just acted like I didn't matter. Cold, emotionally detached. And I didn't want to make things worse at home by airing our dirty laundry, so I kept everything to myself. But after they mocked me like that, I couldn't help but wonder if I'd spoken up sooner. Maybe my grandparents wouldn't have trusted them with my college fund in the first place. Maybe they would have left the money in a different kind of trust, or with someone who actually had my back. After that final fight, and the way they taunted me, I realized I couldn't stay there anymore. I'd reached my limit. Thankfully, I wasn't completely broke. I'd been working part-time at a retail store for a few months and had managed to stash away a small amount of savings. So I made up my mind to leave. I didn't have much of a plan. I figured I'd stay out of the house as long as my money held out, and once it ran dry, I'd figure something out. Honestly, even sleeping on a park bench felt like a better option than going back to that house and pretending things were okay. Another thing I decided that night was that it was finally time to speak up. Even though I wasn't close to most of my extended family, I was done keeping quiet. So I packed what I could fit into my backpack and walked out the door. The first place I went was my best friend's house. I explained to her parents that I needed a place to crash for a few days, and they were kind enough to say yes. After settling in, I told them everything that had been going on. That night, I also reached out to some of my relatives. My dad is an only child, but he has a few cousins I barely knew. I messaged them, just hoping someone might be willing to help. I wasn't sure what kind of response I'd get, but to my surprise, the next morning I got a message back from one of my uncles. He's the eldest son of my grandfather's older brother, so he's quite a bit older than my dad. He's also a respected man in our extended family. He serves in the military and holds a fairly high rank, which gives him a certain level of authority and influence that people actually listen to. When I saw that he'd responded to my message on Facebook and had given me his phone number, I didn't hesitate. I called him right away. We had a short conversation where I explained the situation in detail. He didn't say much at the time. He just listened carefully and then told me he would take care of it. For now, he said, I needed to stay away from my parents, which I was already doing anyway. A few hours later, I knew he hadn't just said those words to make me feel better. My phone started blowing up, non-stop calls and messages from my parents. I didn't answer the calls, but I read every message. From what I gathered, my uncle had contacted a lawyer, the same one who had been in charge of executing my grandparents' will. He was now preparing to sue my parents for misusing the trust funds. The will had clearly stated that the money was meant for my college education, nothing else. If they'd done what they were supposed to, I wouldn't be in this mess. But they hadn't, and now they were trying to talk me into backing down. Their messages said things like, "We're really sorry, and we'll pay for your tuition ourselves," if I would just get my uncle to drop everything. They admitted that the money had already been given to Chloe, who was in the middle of finalizing the house she wanted, and asking for it back now would break her heart. They told me it would be cruel to take that away from her. But they promised that they would make it right for me and cover all my expenses. All I had to do was convince my uncle to stop pushing the lawsuit. Apparently, he had made it very clear that he wasn't messing around. He'd spoken directly to my parents and even had the lawyer on the line, who also happened to be a family friend. From what they told me, the lawyer was fully on board and said he was going to make sure my parents were held accountable. After reading all that, I decided to give them a call. I didn't have a big speech planned or anything, I just wanted to hear what they had to say face to face, or voice to voice at least. The second I called, they picked up, almost as if they were waiting by the phone. Both of them started talking at once, apologizing for everything. They said they'd been overwhelmed and hadn't known how to handle the conversation with me. They admitted that they'd been distant, that they hadn't treated me fairly, and asked me to give them another chance to make things right. But then they said the one thing that made everything crystal clear. They told me the only thing they couldn't do was ask Chloe to return the money. That would be too selfish and unfair to her, since she hadn't done anything wrong. And right then, I understood exactly where their priorities were. They weren't sorry for betraying me, they were just sorry they got caught. When my parents made it clear they still couldn't put my feelings ahead of Chloe's even after everything, I knew right then they were never going to change. So I told them my decision was final. I wasn't going to back down, and I definitely wasn't going to tell my uncle to stop. I wanted my money returned, and I intended to get it back, especially since Chloe hadn't officially closed on the house yet. The money was still there unspent, and that gave me hope. That was 3 days ago. I haven't spoken to my parents since, and in the heat of everything, I went ahead and blocked them. I'll admit, I said some things in anger during that last conversation, and now I find myself feeling conflicted. My uncle has been completely on my side through all of this. We've kept in touch, although our conversations are usually short and very matter-of-fact. I haven't told him yet that part of me has been second-guessing everything. I haven't said a word about the doubts creeping in, mainly because he's done so much for me already, and the last thing I want is to let him down by saying I'm considering taking my parents up on their offer to cover my college tuition instead of following through with the lawsuit. But I've taken some time to really think it through. It's been 4 days since this all started, and I've made up my mind for good. I don't want any kind of settlement from my parents. The reason is simple: I don't trust them, not with my future, not with my education, not with anything that matters. The difference between their offer and actually getting my grandparents' full college fund is huge. If I accept their offer, they'll control when and how I get money, most likely just enough to cover tuition each semester, and nothing more. But if I get the full fund back, it'll be under my control, and I can manage the money myself. For all I know, I might get that scholarship I applied for, and if I do, I wouldn't even need to use the full amount. That leftover money could help me get started in life after college, something I'd never have if I relied on my parents. Because if I accept their deal and just let them pay for school, I'll graduate with no savings and no safety net. I'd be right back where I started, dependent on people who have already shown me exactly where I stand in their world. So I didn't tell my uncle about any of my doubts. We're still talking regularly, and I recently had to ask him for a bit of extra help. I needed to move out of my best friend's place. Her family had been incredibly kind letting me stay, but I didn't want to impose any longer. They never said a word to make me feel unwelcome, but I could tell. My best friend already has 3 younger siblings, and I know I wasn't making things easier by being there. Even if they weren't going to say anything, I felt it was my responsibility to do the right thing and move on. Luckily, my uncle had already told me that I could reach out to him for anything I needed until college starts, and he meant it. So that's what I did. I've seen some people online call me entitled for demanding this money, that I should just suck it up, take out loans, or get through school like everyone else. But here's what I want to say to that: I'm not asking for anything extra. I'm asking for what was meant for me. My grandparents created a college fund so that I wouldn't have to struggle through school or drown in debt like so many others do. That money was a gift they left behind specifically for me, not for my sister to buy a house she can't afford. And let's not forget, my parents inherited their own share of the estate, and Chloe got all the jewelry, which is worth a fortune. If they were in such desperate need, maybe they could have asked my mom's parents for help. But no, they went straight for my college fund. To make things worse, my maternal grandfather actually sent me an email calling me spoiled and bratty for letting my uncle sue my parents. He said I was acting entitled. I didn't even reply. I just blocked the email address without a second thought. I'm not close to them at all, and frankly, I don't need to hear their judgment. They can keep their lessons about morals and family loyalty. I know that was just my parents using them to guilt-trip me from another angle. At this point, I'm pretty sure the legal papers have already been served, though my uncle hasn't said anything about it directly. I've asked him a couple of times, but he keeps things pretty tight-lipped. All he tells me is that I should focus on school and keep working toward that scholarship I want. Everything else, he says, will be handled, and when I need to know something, I'll be told. He's got this authoritative energy that makes it hard to argue with, but the truth is, I trust him. If he hasn't kept me in the loop on certain details, I believe there's a reason for it. Honestly, it's kind of a relief. If I had to carry the weight of every legal detail on top of everything else, I'd be completely overwhelmed. So far, this is the first time I've felt like someone's really in my corner. I've got no complaints about that. College is coming up soon, and with any luck, I'll be able to leave all this mess behind, including my so-called family. I just have to hang in there a little longer, and I'll finally be free. Update 2: It's been about a week and a half since my last update, and 2 days ago, I moved into a new apartment thanks to my uncle. He called in a few favors and found a place for me. I'm sharing it with a roommate who's a little older than me, but she's super kind and already knows my whole situation. My uncle is covering the rent, which is a huge relief. But he told me I'd be responsible for groceries and other daily stuff. He offered to cover those too, but he said it'd be better for me to learn how to manage my own money, and honestly, I agree with him. I've got a part-time job and some savings, so I can handle it. It feels good to be taking care of myself, even in small ways. Covering my share of groceries isn't too hard. I've got a part-time job, and honestly, it's the least I can do. My uncle's already done so much for me that it feels like a small thing to handle myself. As for the lawsuit, he kept his promise and only filled me in when I needed to know what was going on. A few days ago, my parents were officially served. Turns out, they're willing to negotiate now, so we're in mediation. But if that doesn't lead anywhere, the next step is taking it to court. Honestly, they seem desperate to avoid that, and according to our lawyer, there's a good chance we'll get the money back in the next session. We had our first mediation virtually, none of us could meet in person, and honestly, I didn't want to see them anyway. The whole time, my parents seemed incredibly uneasy. They kept nodding along, agreeing that what they did was wrong, and then, surprise, they brought up the settlement offer again. The same one they initially offered, that they'd pay my way through school instead of returning the full fund. I shut that down immediately. I told them I wanted the full amount returned, nothing less. They started with the same excuses, saying they didn't want to hurt Chloe by asking for the money back, especially since she was just about to buy the house of her dreams. But I told them straight up I didn't care. That money was meant for my education, and they had no right to touch it. After a bit of back and forth, they asked for one more mediation session in a couple of days. Our lawyer seems optimistic that we'll be able to finalize everything then. And I don't think my parents or Chloe will be foolish enough to spend that money in the meantime. They know it would only bring more legal trouble their way. To be honest, the only person I feel a little sorry for is Chloe. She was really excited about that house. For the past few months, every time she and her boyfriend came over for dinner, that's all they talked about: buying a home, decorating it, making it their own. She was obsessed with the idea. But still, she never should have accepted that money, especially if she knew she couldn't afford a house on her own. That's on her. That said, I don't hate Chloe, and she doesn't hate me either. We used to argue a lot growing up, but over the last few years, things had mellowed out between us. Since I left home, we haven't talked, and I wasn't sure if she even knew where the money came from. But now I know. After today's decision, our parents had to tell her, and she finally found out. Apparently, she never asked for their help. She was planning on taking out a loan, and they offered the money to her. She didn't question it, just assumed it was a kind gesture and accepted it. A couple of hours ago, she messaged me on Instagram. She apologized for everything, even though it wasn't really her fault. She said she was sorry for all the drama and wished me the best. It was actually kind of sweet, and I thanked her for it. There's no real love between us right now, but there's no hate either. And for the time being, I can live with that. Maybe someday we'll rebuild something, maybe not, but this neutral ground feels like peace. Update 3: A big news: my parents have finally agreed to return the college fund. They didn't look thrilled about it, but it's done. They made their decision, and now they're going to have to stick with it. My uncle, my lawyer, and I are all really happy about the outcome. And another thing, Chloe reached out to me today. She had no idea that the money they gave her came out of my college fund. She was under the impression that our parents were just helping her out of their own inheritance. She said she never asked for the money in the first place and had always planned to take out a home loan. In her message, she told me she felt terrible about the situation and wished me well. She said it wasn't her place to apologize, but she was still sorry for the trouble. I appreciated her reaching out. It was mature of her. I responded and thanked her. We're not suddenly close again, but at least there's no tension or resentment between us. Update 4: A hi again, just wanted to share that I officially started college last month. I meant to post sooner, but everything's been so busy and exciting. My roommate and I have already gotten really close, and I'm loving my classes. It's been a fresh start, and I'm soaking up every bit of it. My uncle and aunt helped me move into the dorms, even stayed a couple of nights at a nearby hotel to make sure I got settled in properly. I honestly don't know what I would have done without their support. They were the only ones from my family who actually showed up for me, not just with words, but with real action. Everyone else offered their thoughts or said sorry in passing, but my uncle? He stood by me. He fought for me. And that means everything. I know I'll probably never be able to repay him for all he's done, but I'm going to do my best at school and in life to make him proud. Oh, and one last bit of good news: I got into my dream college with a scholarship. That means I won't even need to use the full amount of the college fund, which is amazing because I'll have some money left over after graduation. It's like a head start for my future, and I'm beyond grateful for that. Life's finally looking up. Things are good. I honestly can't complain.